On the other hand, you need to know what you're voting for, and too often people say they get the little booklet from the council, they don't know the names, they tick a box anyway to be good citizens, and then they're disappointed with the outcome. That's why we believe if people have the option of voting for local candidates in their community who've signed up to a set of values for which ACT is well known, reducing waste and getting lower rates, stopping trying to get people out of their cars, stopping the constant interruption in people's transport that drives people mad, and finally getting rid of the racial discrimination that has crept into council politics, I think that's something that people would love to vote for. We'll be looking for these candidates to sign up at our website today, which has just gone live, actlocal.nz. We'll be going through a process of looking for expressions of interest. We'll be pumping this to existing ACT members and supporters, and then we'll be going through asking, do we have a viable slate of candidates that we believe can win and do the business for 3 years? If we do, it's all on. If we don't, nothing ventured, nothing win. We believe it's critical that everyone in New Zealand does their bit to get better representation at council level. Very happy to talk about other issues of the day if people would like me to. However, if I can just take questions on this subject first, I'd be very happy to do that. Before just acknowledging that I'm joined by my ACT Party local government spokesperson, Cam Luxton. Cam's been heavily engaged in the politics of Tauranga, which is, I think, one of the places that's been most failed by local government in recent years, and he's here to take questions on that too.
Just on those areas,
party machine in terms of oversight of the candidates who are stepping forward and stuff like that.
Well, I think it's really important that we keep working on our campaigning machinery. ACT is growing enormously. We've been running bigger and bigger campaigns, and from an ACT Party point of view, this is an opportunity to show more New Zealanders the values that we stand by: less government waste, more freedom to choose on things like transport, and less discrimination based on things like race. And also, frankly, from the party's point of view, is an opportunity to work on our campaigning capacity, which is important over going into 26.
Will you be endorsing anyone running for re-election as a councillor?
Yeah, I've talked to people who are existing councillors who've said, actually, this makes a lot of sense. We stand with ACT on a set of values that are familiar to New Zealanders, that are underrepresented in council. We get assistance with campaigning. That could be a popular option for some people who are already on councils.
Can you just outline specific areas or issues that you have in mind for local ACT representation?
Look, we need councils that deliver the services that no one else in the community can deliver. Councils try to do far too many things for far too many people and discover they can't pay the bills, while in reality they have leaky pipes, clogged roads, not enough parking, too many vanity projects that aren't actually making the proverbial boat go faster. That is a core ACT value. Get the government focused on the things where it can make a difference for ratepayers or taxpayers' money. Then there's this question of transport. For far too long we've been trying to change the way that people get around instead of facilitating them to live the lives as they would like to. We're not into social engineering. If a cycleway can actually be occupied and useful, then we're all over it. But who's seen one of those? And finally, there's endless racial discrimination in councils, and we just have a simple vision of a country where each person is valued for their common humanity. We champion that at central government level. We intend to champion it at local government level.
And other than Tauranga, any specific areas where you imagine there might be quite a bit of interest?
Look, the area we're targeting starts at Cape Reinga and it ends at the Bluff.
Are there candidates already or the councillors already keen to sign up with you guys, or?
Yeah, we've had discussions with them. Obviously, we're not going to tell everyone who they are straight away, because they'll just be feeling their way through it. We'll be checking them out and they'll be checking us out. And in a month or two, we'll have a pretty good idea, is this on? Or is it a good idea that maybe is for another time?
How much already kind of do something similar, don't they? Are you just trying to match what they're doing?
Well, I think people who want lower rates and less social engineering, they need a brand they can vote for, just as the left, people who want higher rates and more social engineering, seem to have someone to vote for. I think the rest of us should too.
Is it too late for 2025's election?
No, I mean, we've got, October, it's currently March, month 10 minus month 7, so we've got almost 7 months for this. I would say to people, if you can't put together a proposition for the voters in 7 months, then maybe the world's trying to tell you something.
Are you looking to break up the Auckland Ratepayer Alliance? Was that effectively ACT and National's representatives?
Oh, Glenn, look, you bring this up every time. That's a totally separate organisation. You know that. We have this discussion every day.
How much independence would you expect an ACT local body rep to have if they're under that ACT party banner, but they're representing a local area?
Look, it's local. ACT Local is about local practical approaches, drawing on timeless values. So, of course, the issues in each area will be different. However, the values of, is this core business for council, or is this something that maybe a business or community group should be doing? That's a big question that should be asked and answered every time the council makes a decision. Is this supporting how people would like to get around their city, or is it trying to socially engineer them? That's a question that should be asked and answered at every decision. And are we treating people as humans with universal humanity, or are we dividing them by ancestry, ranked by the time of arrival in this country? Those are the basic questions that are universal. The specific application will vary according to each community.
So you wouldn't expect there to be a particularly descriptive policy platform that local government candidates, the ACT will write the local government candidates?
Well, we will in time release a manifesto, a set of values that we expect candidates campaigning under the ACT banner to sign up to and be faithful to, because that's how they show the voters who elected them that they are reliable. What you vote for and what you see on the tin is what you get in the output.
You mentioned cycleways and road cones. What about things like libraries and swimming pools? Where does ACT sit on those sort of local issues?
Well, in my view, libraries are something that are a special place in the community, and you don't really see competition. There's not a private library system out there, so I don't see that as something that we would be against. What we are against is governments that go into businesses where there's a private competitor. There is no need for a council to do that. What we are against is councils who say 86% of our people want to drive, but we're going to put our money into trying to make them get to work another way because we think we know best for them. We're opposed to that.
Are you ruling out supporting any mayoral candidate?
We've taken the view that we want to get people around the council table. We want to see people build their experience. Maybe if this goes well, then in 2028 there might be ACT mayoral candidates, but right now we want people in the engine room of councils taking ACT's values of less waste, more choice in transport and less racial division to the council table. Maybe the mayoralty could be in the future.
Yeah, and any ACT candidates in Māori wards?
Well, again, the ACT Party is not in favour of Māori wards. It would be unusual for us to stand in Māori wards, just as it would be unusual for us to stand in Māori wards for the general election.
Is there a reason why this took so long? The Greens, New Zealand First, Labour, Te Pāti Māori even have been standing local candidates for quite a while.
Well, sometimes you're damned if you do it, you're damned if you don't. We've done it today. The ACT Party has been growing in recent years, as the Herald reported, and I think the time is right. There's enough demand for it, and ACT is able to supply that demand, so here we are.
Do you think that in terms of ACT growing, that is sustainable? You dropped in the latest poll, I think it was 2.4 points or something to 7%. So are you sure there's enough momentum behind the party?
Hey, look, if RNZ wants to start reporting every time ACT goes up 2 points in a poll, that would be a wonderful, wonderful eventuality and occurrence, and I would fully endorse it. I note that the poll that's come subsequent to that, ACT actually went up a point, so who knows, maybe we're infinitely on the up and up, or perhaps maybe these polls fluctuate a bit.
So you're sure there's enough momentum behind the party as the polls dip up and down as they do?
Oh, look, when you first started interviewing me and I was the only ACT MP, you never thought we'd be here today. You never thought, geez, I can't believe that they would make David Seymour the acting Prime Minister. But it happened, and I think we could also do some really good work at local level as well.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
National should be running local government candidates?
Well, they've got their own leader and board and party apparatus to make those decisions for them. I think that people who are on the right are looking for an option, and there's a lot of people who vote National for central government who would look at an ACT candidate and say, actually, that's pretty close to my values, I think I'll vote for them. Sorry.
I was going to move on to something else.
Right.
Oh, so I mean, you're obviously speaking about the fact that voters struggle to identify the values and whatnot of various candidates. So,
Yeah.
So you're clearly saying that you do think party apparatus in the government is a useful thing.
Yeah, look, one of the things that political parties do is they clarify voter choice, because you can have a look at the brand and know what you're getting. Now, look, central government went through this. Yeah, okay, they're right. Central government had a whole lot of independence. In 1891, King Dick Seddon formed the Liberal Party, clarified voter choice, and ended up being in Parliament as Prime Minister for 13 years. Not saying we're going to go that far, but certainly we've known for at least 130 years in New Zealand that having candidates stand under a brand so voters know what they're getting is a valuable thing.
I
Right.
think it was John Balance.
John Balance. Well, look, okay, history buff. Seddon seemed to benefit from that.
As acting Prime Minister, is there an update on New Zealand's involvement in the coalition of the willing? Because Sir Keir Starmer is saying that generals will be meeting on Thursday.
Well, certainly I'll just wait for that truck. Certainly the New Zealand Defence Force has been heavily involved in discussions in Europe over the past several days. I just make 2 points. There can't be a coalition of the willing until there's some sort of post-conflict situation. At this point, sadly, until the Russians decide to come to the table and actually play ball with a ceasefire, then we don't have that situation to talk about. Second of all, the details of that coalition would need to be ironed out. I think it's fair to say that the New Zealand government stance is that we remain totally behind Ukraine. We continue to give military and other aid. We continue to sanction Russia, and we continue to give accommodation to Ukrainians who would like to come here. On the other hand, we are a country that cannot defend itself alone. We must rely on collective defence, and that means in 2 world wars and at many other times we've joined peacekeeping and other coalitions. So our stance is that we're backing Ukraine, we're open to helping, we believe in collective security, but right now there's no post-conflict situation and there's no coalition to join.
Is the NZDF involved in those talks happening in London about the operational nature that, or operational military response that could be offered?
Look, I understand they are, but there's quite a few different talks going on in Europe, so I prefer to be able to get back to you about those specific talks. But yes, they have been heavily engaged in recent days.
Just with your ex-party leader hat on, is X comfortable with where the government's at on climate change, or do you feel that the government's going too far?
I think the opportunity is for New Zealand to create and join a coalition of willing nations who are exposed to methane, start making the case to the rest of the world that methane should be treated differently. I believe New Zealand, with the most efficient farmers in the world, is being hammered by anti-methane policies globally, and yet there's other countries such as Uruguay, most of South America in fact, and a lot of Asia growing rice, where a lot of their emissions are methane and methane's not been properly accounted for.
Are you comfortable though with what the government's doing in relation to Paris on those climate change?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a question, should New Zealand be in the Paris Agreement? I believe we should be, because the trade retaliation from not being in it would be greater than the costs of being in it. That may change. Maybe it'll be different in the future, but right now that's the calculus. Second of all, are we doing what we have to do to remain in Paris? Yes, given what we inherited from the previous government, this government has ratcheted up our commitment, but no more than absolutely necessary to stay in the agreement. So we're doing the minimum, we're thinking about methane, and we're considering the calculus of staying in all the time. Right now, I think we've got tough choices, but we've got them right.
Have you had any recent advice on that? Because I think previously you've floated pulling out of the Paris Agreement or having a policy around that. Have you had recent advice on what that could lead to?
Well, the question was, have I had advice on pulling out of Paris? I haven't. That would be primarily the Climate Change Minister and ultimately the whole Cabinet. We're not currently considering that kind of advice, but anyone can see. The US is out, the Canadians and Australians are about to have elections with potentially elected governments that will take a different stance. If those countries start moving, I think New Zealand will have to recalculate too.
But New Zealand has FTAs with the UK and the EU in particular that require us to remain.
Yeah, and I suspect that if you start to see more countries shifting on their commitment to the Paris Agreement, then a lot of those questions are going to be raised about can FTAs be enforced or renegotiated to deal with a new reality, because clearly the world is moving and politicians are realising it's going to be very challenging to explain to New Zealand. It's not a political thing, no matter which party you're from. It's pretty challenging to explain why you're sending billions of dollars overseas to get no direct benefit. You could argue, well, the benefit is that we all have to do our bit, but billions of dollars overseas for no direct benefit, every country is going to find that challenging to explain to their voters, and that's where I think you start to see a shift.
Most other countries aren't relying on overseas mitigation, most of them are just doing the work at home.
I just make the point that if you're in New Zealand and that's what you've got to explain, then you're in a challenging place. And if you can say we're doing it at home, sure. But actually, often doing it domestically is more expensive than overseas. However, the psychology of sending money overseas effectively to buy pieces of paper is even harder to explain, even when it's cheaper. That's the challenge that I think all politicians will face as Paris evolves.
So which is your preferred option? Sending money overseas for no benefit, doing it at home but it's more expensive, or not doing it?
Well, my preferred option is not to spend money that is not delivering a benefit to New Zealanders, period. And what that may mean, I think the opportunity for New Zealand is for our government, having done the Act negotiated review of methane and its true impact on climate, to then take that position to the world and say, look, who are the like-minded nations who are getting hammered on their methane charges? Maybe they should be treated a little bit differently and, frankly, a little bit more sympathetically, given the realities of methane being a short-lived gas that deteriorates.
What did you think of the findings of that review? It just said the same thing that the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment said back in 2018, which is it's a bit complicated, but roughly methane makes up 2/3 of our warming, and it's short-lived, but also it's powerful in that short period.
Well, the issue, though, is that so long as you have stable or falling levels of methane, the contribution to warming is actually either steady or in decline. So what we actually need to do in order to meet our obligation of no net contribution to warming is not very much at all. And I think if we're going to start seeing declines in methane emissions, then we can actually make the argument that we're reducing the overall contribution to warming. I'm not sure that we're being fully credited with that through a split gas approach at Paris, that we can go out and negotiate a much better deal for New Zealand. Frankly, in my view, a lot of these diplomats in the past have been spending more of their time explaining the position of international organisations to New Zealanders, rather than explaining the interests of New Zealanders to these international organisations.
Will the ACT Party campaign on keeping or getting rid of the school lunches?
Well, we'll see how that works out. I think a lot of people have underestimated what a good job we're going to do on this, given the ability of the contract to deliver once it's running properly. There's been a huge problem. People have seen a supplier that was undersupplying the lunches go into liquidation. Since then, the production of the lunches that are supposed to be produced, not the substitutes, has been rising every day as better managements help the people working in that factory to produce them better. So who knows, it might be an unexpected success story.
Has it been weird for you, given you don't really support the scheme at all, to put so much effort into it?
Not really, because ultimately I'm a professional. I get given a job. I sometimes have a chuckle at the irony. The guy that was opposed to the school lunch program is now responsible for the school lunch program. But I'm doing my best. And when we've had challenges, there was late delivery, we're onto that. There was problems with quality. We got rid of those meals, and we're quickly filling them in with the ones we originally intended. So look, I'm ultimately judged whether I did a good job. And I just predict, give it a couple of weeks, and we'll see the meals originally intended coming on stream at the volumes required, and people might be saying, oh, this is not so bad, why do we get so worried?
Did you ask to have that responsibility as Associate Minister, or was it the PM asking you to do it?
You know what, negotiations are sort of like a war zone. I can't remember who was looking up and who was going down and whose idea it was, but somehow we ended up with school lunches. I think it's fair to say that there wasn't a long queue out the door for this particular responsibility. But look, you sign up, you're part of the government, and you do the job as best you can. And I actually think people who take a long view, yep, there was a problem, but as I've said many times, lots of problems in life. The issue is not whether they happen, you can't change that. The issue is how you deal with it.
What would you say to people who think that this government and Simon Watts are more of a threat to farming than James Shaw was?
Well, I'd have to actually ask some clarifying questions of anyone saying that, because Simon Watts has inherited a circumstance where he can't actually go backwards. He can only go forwards, and what he's chosen to do is the minimum viable option within the agreement that James Shaw signed us up to. He's having to increase the amount of cuts to emissions because of the deal that James Shaw signed us up to, and he's having to increase it from quite a high target for cuts because of the deal that James Shaw set us up to. So, if you want to criticise Simon Watts, just remember James Shaw had to crawl so Simon could run.
Hey, were you a bit upset by Rawiri Waititi's social media post?
No, I don't like the way you put that question. I'll tell you why. Because it makes it about my response and my emotion. Whether I'm upset is not what's important. What's important is how we treat each other in this country. And I think when you go and say that a specific individual who's publicly known deserves an F in hiding, you just ask yourself, is that the best conduct we can get from parliamentarians? Is that the best representation of Te Ao Māori? Is that really where we want to be as a country? And I'd say to people, if you're in a Māori electorate, maybe you voted for Te Pāri Māori, just ask yourself, is that really the best representation you can hope for? Is that going to help with the aspirations of your rangatahi, your mokopuna? I don't think so. Maybe it's time to either demand that they behave a bit better, or maybe it's time to get someone else in. And I don't often advocate voting for Labour, but maybe it's time for a few Labour candidates to step up in the Māori wards, get rid of this antisocial activity. And I'll just give you this thought. As an opposition party, ACT Party could be accused of many things, but we never failed to put out detailed public policy alternatives that would make this country a better place. Where are the policy alternatives from Te Pāri Māori other than making everything about race?
You interpret it as a threat.
Well, I think what you can see is that in today's environment, and you know this because you guys at TVNZ have had to up your security, you go around saying that a person deserves an F in hiding, then the risk is always that somebody's going to decide that that's actually a good idea and they'll get someone's approval if they actually carry it out. That's a risk you got to take seriously.
When they say you deserve an F in hiding, was the post just suggesting that they'd use you as motivation to cut the laws, to do some passionate weed whacking?
Well, look, I mean, we're all up for a bit of passionate weed whacking at the best of times, but I just make the point that whenever there's been any kind of comment, any comment I've made, nobody in the media has been rushing to put the most favourable possible construction and say, oh, maybe he just meant. Totally opposite reaction. And I think one of the things the New Zealand public will be asking themselves is, does our media do its job? Do they play even-handedly about these two comments? I bet I never got asked a question, oh, maybe you just meant that in a really funny and cool way. It's always the opposite way around, and that's one of the issues people have. Secondary to the actual comments is how they're covered.
Does it make you regret, though, the Ministry of Pacific People's comments, seeing what it's like when people are making those kinds of jokes at you?
No, I wonder if you'll ever regret asking that question, because there's a very big difference to something that is multi-layered in its irony, that was stated to be untrue at the time and didn't actually target any specific individual, versus having, what's the curse word you guys say in America? Having swear words directed at a particular individual with specific and plausible violence. That's quite different. And again, if you can't see that difference, I probably can't help you.
Actually, joking about bombing is worse than joking about hitting someone. I mean, how are both not bad things to do?
I think the issue is this actually plausible? I think if anyone seriously believed that I was going to disinter a 400-year-old figure who failed in his plot after I said that it was actually not meant seriously as soon as I said it, again, there's probably ways to explain it to you more simply, but I can't think what they are.
I mean, taking your point that individuals and organisations are different, are you being a little bit cheeky here with I was just talking about Guy Fawkes. If someone made a threat to do a Guy Fawkes on the Beehive, you'd expect that to be taken quite seriously, wouldn't you?
Not really. If they made it in the sense of I actually mean this, and it's not something I've disowned as soon as I made the comment. If you said that I'm going to do one rather than we're going to bring back the guy who's been dead for 400 years, I feel like actually we sometimes underestimate the intelligence of the New Zealand public here, whereas saying someone is going to get, quote, F in hiding, that is something that is plausible, that sadly happens in New Zealand with our domestic violence problems, is targeted at an individual, and I believe it's a totally different category. So.
Your Chief of Staff sent me the photo of the finished product from Māori talking. It's not bad, is it? You've done a good job.
Well, again, I can't imagine anyone from the New Zealand press asking somebody to, I guess, appraise their handiwork in this circumstance if the shoe was on the other foot. And that's the issue here, right? That's what people are looking at, and that's the feedback that's rolling in. It's being texted into radio stations, emailed in to politicians. I think people just go to ask, is this really the news media they signed up for? Probably not. No.
Sorry, David, just back on
Yeah.
hypothetically, if the Māori were hopeful came to act and said, I'd like to feel like our values align, would you support that candidate?
Yeah, absolutely, but I don't know if we'd support them to stand in a Māori ward. Yeah. All right.
One more clarification on that. You said you didn't want to endorse mayoral candidates. What's the case if someone does want to run for council and mayor and you want to endorse them for council? I don't know if you've thought about that.
It's a good question. Well, look, never say never. But I just make the point that we're looking for people to stand in councils. If Jesus comes back and says, I want to stand for Auckland, for Mayor of Wellington, we might say, buddy, with that hair and beard, how could we not endorse you? By the way, the ACT Party is not actually going to bring back Jesus. That was clearly a joke, just in case anyone starts to get worried about it, all right? Thank you very much for all your time. Do I reckon Jesus would support it?
Historical figures would support the ACT Party. Is Jesus one of those people?
You know what? I believe that Jesus very well might support ACT. From what I know about him, he believed that Jesus believed that each person had inherent dignity, was made in the image of God, Imago Dei, and deserved to be treated with universal human rights. In many respects, the underlying teachings of Jesus and the ACT Party overlap, but I just want to be clear, the ACT Party is not promising to disinter Guy Fawkes, Jesus, or any historical figure to stand for mayor, council, or any other position. Thank you very much.
That was the best question.